Hello, this is the Harbor and Light. I'm Mary. I give a conservative take about the world around me. So, feedback is important. Reach out to me. I have the links provided for you. Alright, so some of the audio platforms that I'm on Audible. I was on Audible, but scratch that. Spreaker. That's better. Spotify. Pandora, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, just to name a few. Alright, so this episode is all about literary concepts, right? So I'm going to go into depth and talk about naturalism. And I'm going to extend it out and talk about other literary concepts. And then, of course, give my opinions about this. All right, here we go. And I mean that by on Wednesday, extend out and talk about other literary concepts. All right, here we go. Okay, so naturalism. So when I first understood, I was really introduced to this when going into college, and it's quite interesting. So really the concept is all about Darwinism, the Darwin complex, dog eat dog, man versus nature, that kind of concept, but it's really, really, really extreme to the aspects of simply put, no matter what you do, you're pretty much, out of luck. And so it's quite interesting that this concept came from France. Started this literary movement, started out of France, and explored out towards the world, and seeping into America. So you get these you get these images, you get these literary works, particularly where they don't really, there's no silver lining here. There's no aspects of resolving anything, really. There's no, you're just fighting and fighting and fighting to the very bitter end. And so, I don't know, it's kind of very bleak. Well, not kind of very bleak. It just is really bleak. And I think, this is my opinion. So I think that when this literary concept came about, it was missing the aspects of what I think Darwin was trying to prove or trying to show with the aspects of evolution and the aspects of, primal nature, within that from my point of view, this is what I took from it here. And I'll get back to the literary concept. So, Of course, there's a lot of harsh reality that goes with the surviving nature and being in that mode. But when you get through that and when you find you adapt and you change, that helps you to evolve and get to the next step. Of course, you have you won't have a, evolved or evolutionary, with the evolutionary, you won't have an enlightened perspective about, your surroundings. You'll typically just have in that survival mode. I got to think about what I got to do the next day to survive. But I don't know. There's something within the power and the nature within our natural world here. And a lot of, with understanding that balance, I think that helps the key with that. That's a good key into figuring out, our aspects of human nature and how we survive as humans and how we move in our culture too. But going back to the natural concept, I think it just mainly focus on the negative aspects instead of just seeing it for what it is and, learning and, trying to get through, trying to see different points of views about the aspects of, animals and surviving and the harsh elements and everything, and what it actually intakes and so forth. That it's not all bad. There's something to it, and there's a reason why other species survived over another species. There's something very powerful behind that. And so, I don't know. That's just my point of view about it here. So, I'm going to get into concept. I'm going to read from the AI generated response, and then I'm going to go into more depth. And then also, along the way, just give my opinions. All right, here we go. Okay, here we are. Here is the AI generated response about naturalism and literary history. So naturalism and literature emerged in the late 19th century as a movement that extended in the traditional of realism, focusing on exploring the fundamental causes of characters. So action, choices, and beliefs, particularly emphasizing the influence of family and society on the individuals. This movement was inspired by the principles and the methods of the natural science, especially the ideas of Charles Darwin and the scientific method. So the term naturalism was popularized with Emile Zola, who in 1880 wrote the experimental novel, where he detailed his concept of naturalist novels, applying scientific principles to literature. Zola's work was influenced by Augustin Comte, positivism, Claude Bernard's medical model, and the Taine's historical observations. So Zoles argued that naturalism in literature should be like controlled experiments where characters function as phenomenal to be studied. So in American literature, naturalism began as a branch of realism, but developed distinct characters. So Frank Norris, a key figure in American naturalism, had theories that differed from Zoll's, particularly regarding the status of naturalism within the realms of realism and romanticism. So other prominent American naturalists include Stephen Crane, Jack London, Theodore Dreiser, and Frank Norris. Naturalism emphasizes observation and the scientific method and the portrayal of reality. So adopting a deterministic view where a character's fate is decided by impersonal forces of nature beyond human control. So this movement also includes the sense that the universe itself is indifferent to human life. So the movement's philosophical framework can be described as pessimistic, materialistic determination, where human beings are seen as human beasts, governed by their instinct and passions, as well as by forces of heredity and environment. All right, so I'm going to go into some more thoughts and then extend out into more facts. Okay, so this concept is very interesting. Again, in the aspect too, on this other element, we're thinking about it in this way. So the concept of free will, the concept of spirituality is just, to the wayside, really, because it's saying with this distinct point of view that there's no higher being, there's nothing out there that will, again, protect you. You're just, just that concept of, specifically to the sciences of nature will either eat you alive or you will survive through it if you choose to. And so that's truly an interesting concept. So I think about it like this here too. So when you have that, sort of mentality, you move in a very different direction. So this is what it reminds me of. So when I was in high school, and then of course it's extended out, going to college when you take those interdisciplinary courses. So in high school, it was this concept of this sort of tier or hierarchy of perspective of thinking of, how people, particularly with humans, choose to think and how that structures their process. So this reminds me of this one concept of, truly what it is really, when you break it down, is naturalism point of view. So you're in an animalistic state. You choose and you make the decisions in that way. So when the teacher was explaining it, she's like, I'll give you a good example. So she was explaining this concept to one class, and she was saying that it was a student that was sharing her understanding about it, and she was sharing an example about it. So she said that she specifically picked her, boyfriend, or, in this case, you would label him, from a naturalistic point of view here, a scientific mode or point of view, as a mate. And the sole purpose that she chose him is because of what he could provide and what he, in that sense of what was, pleasable or attractive for a teenage person. His outer exterior, his, what he had as far as, cars and stuff like that, and everything else. So, that's really superficial, but at the same time, there's something to be said about that, specifically choosing somebody that is of, good qualities when it comes to genetics, is physically appealing and so forth. That gets into the whole concept of breaking down the scientific nature of, being superficial and the scientific nature that is of, that concept of, is vastly more important to find somebody that is adapt to be a genetic benefit versus someone that from a sentimental point of view that actually cares about you. And there's something to be said about that. This just, if you move in this fashion, there's truly no balance. There's no in between. It's just with something that's, everything is at the extreme. And when you start to look out into other aspects of, our culture, it makes a lot of sense how that really fits in, because it looks really harsh from a literary point of view, because, you're actually seeing these characters, the end results of these characters, just no matter what they do, no matter, for instance, there's a character, she's very attractive. I think it was by Zola, and she's very attractive, and you think that she would have an easier time in life, but that actually hurt her, and that actually, set her up to be into situations that were very, just not pleasing to go through. If you can imagine what I'm talking about. It was, one of those things you got to check out. So I think it's Zola. But anyway, I don't know. It's a wild concept, but it's something to consider. When the fate of having that sort of mentality, of having no sort of there's no sort of moral compass to anything. It's just specifically survival, grueling, moving, doing things that's beneficial for you, and then at the same time, but like it's saying, it's all being set up like an experiment, and in itself, that's really something to be said about that. Because if you think about that, you told the lens way focused out. What does that mean by, they're set up in an experiment, and they're controlled by the experiment? When you think about that concept, from my point of view, that's some spiritual aspects of that, of a higher creator, a higher being, watching, overseeing over this, and letting things happen the way they do, the way it is, and not interjecting or not trying to give some sort of solution to it. And that's some spiritual undertones that's flipped on its butt, if you ask me, and that's really something to be said about that. That's how that's my take from it. And it's very radical, it's something else. And so it also reminds me of this too, and I'm going to end on this and get to some more facts here. So there is this poem by Robert Frost, and it's called Design. So Robert Frost goes into detail about particularly a human viewing and watching a spider, and just going through the aspects and the details of everything that this just observing what the spider is doing on its day-to-day basis. And then the person, when sees what the spider, how the spider interacts with surviving and then getting its food, its prey and everything, it's offended because it doesn't understand how the spider can do something like that. Because it's looking at everything from a humanistic point of view, from the elements of there's got to be some moral compass to this. You don't just, attack just to get what you need and then move on. And so, that again puts very humanistic traits on animals that don't really need to be there, specifically with the spider. And that's, in that sense, getting away from the understanding and a better concept of being about, or a more evolved concept of how, in this case, insects move about and live their day, and how it is, beneficial to the to our ecosystem, to our, to the planet, and to our way of survival, and a way of how humans exist with insects, how humans exist with animals, and so forth, and not understanding that you got to see things for what it is a lot of the times. And it's very interesting. But I think, I don't know, naturalism is just really, it's a very radical concept. But it's just one of those things, I get it, I see the point. But, it's really speaking truth a lot too. Even though I don't agree with it, it's speaking a lot of truth to the aspect of the end results of just specifically seeing things from there's no sort of anything of fate, or there's just stripping everything down, not seeing things from, if you want to put it in this point of view, from a whimsical point of view, or so forth, or, nothing is diluted. Everything is what it is. All right, so here we go. I'm going to go into more facts about this. Here we go. Okay, so I'm recording outside, so if you hear some noise in the background, that's what's going on. All right, so this is the literary concept. I'm going to break it down for you, of naturalism. So let's go from the start of it. So naturalism in literature and the visual arts, which goes with the aspects of the Van Goghs and so forth, the exceeding that, the Van Gogh types, I say, in the art world, going to the aspects of super realism. I can see that concept being approached with that. All right, so in the 19th and earlier 20th century movement that was inspired by the adaptation of the principles and methods of natural science. So especially the Darwinism view of nature to literature and art. In literature, it extended to the tradition of realism. So aiming at an even more faithful, unselective representation of reality. A verbal slice of life presented without moral judgment. So, that concept where, people are really, to call it as they say, slice of life, people are at their worst, in the depictions of what is shown or showcased, either from the visual arts or the literature arts, and you just see it for what it is, and you place no judgment on it. And then out of that, it comes with the reality of the situation of how to move ahead from it. I'm speaking from my point of view of it. So a verbal slice of life presented without moral judgment. Naturalism differs from realism in its assumption of scientific determination, which led to naturalistic authors to emphasize man's accidental, psychological nature rather than his moral or rational qualities. So individual characters were seen as helpless products of heredity and environment. And that was rightfully so throughout the literary moralities of what was depicted in the natural sense, That, and also with that concept, you're danged if you do, you're danged if you don't. And, what do you do with that? And, and then even stepping further back to the times of Shakespeare, where Shakespeare, he really put it best with the character of Hamlet, Hamlet, or the Hamlet, Hamlet complex. So what this is, seeing everything from so many different points of views to where it paralyzes you. You're frozen within the decision making because you don't really know what path to take because you can understand every different concept and see the reality in it. And then speed tracking ahead, people just doing what they do, and then it just doesn't matter what you do because you're going to get screwed anyway. And so that's really getting to the heart of the matter of naturalism too, and its concept. That says a lot about the aspect of how people moved and thought about, a little glimpse of what people are thinking about at this time. And that even blankets to what other generations perceive this idea of naturalism in literature and the naturalistic philosophy moving towards life and so forth. All right, so individual characters were seen as helpless products of their environment, and they motivated by strong instinctual devices from within and harassed by social and economic pressures from without. As such, they had little will or responsibility for their fates, and the protagonist of their cases was pessimistic at the outset. And so that's very, very, wow, that's something else. So think about it like this. This is what I'm taking from it. So, you pretty much will have that concept of, oh, well, I can't really be accountable for what happens to me. But you know what? Who cares? Because it's not going to work out anyway. So I'll just do whatever the hell I want to do. Wow, that's really something. So naturalism originated in France and had its the theory of the basis was in the critical approach of the Taine, who announced in his introduction to Histoire de la littérature of the analysis of from 1863 to 64 history of English literature. That is, that there is a cause for ambition, for courage, for truth, as there is for distinguished and for muscle movement of the animal heat. So, and vice versa, are products like the Visceral and Sugar thought the first scientific novel was the case history of the servant girl. And, this is going through the cases of these different literary types that are solely around the concept of naturalism. Servant Girl of 1864, the leading exponent of naturalism was the head runner of everything with naturalism was Emile Zola, Emile Zola, whose essay La Roman Experimental of 1880, the experimental novel, began the literary manifesto of the school. So according to Zola, the novelist was no longer to be mere observer, content to record phenomenon, but a detached experimenter who subjects his characters and their passions to a series of tests and who works with emotional and social facts as a chemist works with the matter. So upon Zola's examples, the naturalistic style became a widespread and affected to various most major writers of the period. So Guy de Maupassant, the popular story of the Naturalist, heralds the introduction of the character who is to be treated like a specimen under a microscope. So the early works of, forgive me for the pronunciation of this, George Karl Huntsmans, of the German dramatist Gerald Hauptmann, and of the Portuguese novelist José Maria de Queiroz, was based on the perceptions of naturalism. So, and the theater Libre was found in Paris in 1887 by André Anton and Frédéric Bonn, I believe, of Berlin of 1889 by Otto Brahm to present plays dealing with the new themes of naturalism in a naturalistic style with naturalistic staging. So the parallel development occurred in the visual arts point of view. So painters, following the lead of the realist painter, is said as Gustave Courbet, one of the painters, were choosing themes from contemporary life. Many of them deserted the studio for the open air, finding subjects among the peasants and tradesmen in the street and capturing them as they found them. So one result of this approach was that their finished canvases had the freshness and immediacy of sketches. Zola, the spokesman for literacy and naturalism, was also the first champion of, here we go with Monet, but particularly with Manet with the Impressionist people. That movement, it really twisted the concept of traditional painting where, it was understood, it was very classically understood of what was the concept of how people look, think, feel. And then when you get into the evolution of thinking and the Renaissance, it really even broader stroke of more developed and more concise perspectives of the human body, the human soul, and of what the human spirit is capable of. It's something that juxtaposition of everything there to where Impressionist painting, it's very muted. It's the forerunner, I think, to the concept of modern art here. So despite their claim to complete objectivity, the literary naturalists were handicapped by certain biases and was inherent in their deterministic theories. Though they faithfully reflected nature, it was always a nature red and tooth and claw, which is, dog eat dog, being played to your worst inhibitions, so forth. That's what I take from that. Their views on heredity gave them the concept for simple characters dominated by strong elements of passions. So their views on the overpowering effects of the environment led them to select their subjects into this environment, the slums of the underworld, for example, and documented this and to the sordid details of living your life like that day in, day out, and the drugs of everything. So the dry palette of Vincent van Gogh's naturalistic painting and the Potato Eaters, so this was in Amsterdam, is where of 1885, was the palette of the literary naturalism. Finally, they were unable to suppress an element of romantic protest against the social conditions they described. So, as a historical movement, naturalism per se.
I want some more.
You want some more?
Yeah.
Okay, hold on. Was short-lived, but it contributed to an art enrichment of realism.
More chicken nuggets, Mama.
I have to make. You want some eggs? Cause we don't have any more chicken nuggets. I can make you some eggs. Okay. Hold on, baby. So, as I was saying, naturalism per se was short-lived, but it was contributed to an art enrichment of realism. So, new areas of subject matters and a largeness of formality-less. No formality in the formality. That was indeed closer to life than to art. Its multiplicity of impressionists and conveyed the sense of a world of constant flux. And then the jungle-like aspects of jungle doggy dog world, because it teamed with the interdependent lives. So in American literature, naturalism has a delayed bloom effect in the work of Hamlin Garland, Stephen Crane, Frank Norris, and Jack London. And it reached its peak at the art of Theodore Dreiser, James T. Burroughs, Studs Logan, trilogy from 1932 to 35, which is one of the latest expression of true naturalism. And these links are provided in the source that I have, that I'm reading from and that I gathered from. All right, so I'd like to know what you think about the concept of naturalism, the literature concept, and how they expelled into our society and the society in general at large. Feel free to reach out to me. Those links will be provided for you. All right, so this reaches the end of the Harboring Light. Tune in, turn up, and absolutely take care. Bye-bye for now.